Daniel Kofi wiped the chalk dust from his hands, for what he didn't know would be the last time. The afternoon sun streamed through the cracked windows of the village school, illuminating the eager faces of his 23 students. At 20, he had already spent 4 years nurturing minds in this forgotten corner of the country, but today felt different. Teacher Daniel called out AMA, a bright girl with determined eyes. "Why do the soldiers take our fathers away?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Daniel's heart clenched as he looked at these children, his children who deserved truth in a world built on lies. The regime had forbidden any discussion of politics, any questioning of authority. But how could he look into their innocent faces and feed them the poison of silence? "Because, my dear ones," he said softly, kneeling to their level, "sometimes people forget that power belongs to all of us, not just a few." That evening, Daniel walked home through the dusty streets to the small house he shared with Akasua, his beloved of 3 years. She was waiting on the porch, her beautiful face creased with worry. "You spoke out again today, didn't you?" she whispered, taking his hands in hers. "I couldn't lie to them, Akasua, not to the children." She pressed her forehead against his. "I love your courage, Daniel, but I fear what it will cost us." Before dawn, they came. Heavy boots, shouting voices, the splintering of wood. Daniel kissed Akasua one last time, tasting her tears, before they dragged him away. The last thing he saw was her silhouette in the doorway, hand pressed to her heart. As his world disappeared into darkness, the cell measured 6 feet by 8 feet. Daniel had counted the paces 1,000 times. The walls wept with moisture, and rats scurried across the floor, but it was the silence that nearly broke him. For weeks, he heard nothing but the echo of his own breathing and the distant screams of other prisoners copped in Mensa. The prison warden took particular pleasure in Daniel's suffering. "You think you're a special teacher?" he sneered during his daily visits. "Your words mean nothing here." One morning, Mensa arrived with a wheelbarrow full of Daniel's confiscated books and letters, everything he had written, everything he had cherished. Daniel watched helplessly as they doused his life's work in gasoline. No more teaching, no more writing. Mensa laughed as the flames consumed years of lesson plans and love letters from Akasua. "You are nothing now." But in the dancing shadows, cast by the burning books, Daniel found something unexpected. Resolve. That night, he began tapping against the wall a rhythm he had taught his students for learning multiplication tables. From the adjacent cell came an answering tap. "Can you hear me, brother?" Daniel whispered through the crack in the wall. "I hear you, teacher," came the reply. "We all hear you." Word by word, lesson by lesson, Daniel began to teach through the prison walls. Mathematics became a language of hope. History lessons turned into dreams of freedom. His fellow prisoners, many of them illiterate, began to learn not just letters and numbers, but the power of their own voices. Even in the deepest darkness, Daniel discovered, light found a way to spread. His words had not died in those flames, they had been reborn, carried by whispers through stone and steel, reaching hearts that hunger and fear could not touch. Outside the prison walls, Akasua had not been idle. Each week, she traveled the dangerous road to the prison, carrying what little food she could afford and messages of love that the guards would never allow Daniel to receive. But her real work happened in the shadows. In the village where Daniel once taught, his former students had grown into young adults. They remembered their teacher's lessons about courage, about truth, about the power of words. AMA, now 18, had become a leader among them. Teacher Daniel said that knowledge shared is power multiplied, she told the gathered crowd in the forest clearing. His words didn't die with his imprisonment. They live in us. The underground network grew slowly. Carefully, Akasua smuggled Daniel's teachings, reconstructed from memory by his students across the country. Market women whispered his lessons to their children. Farmers shared his stories during harvest time. University students wrote his words on walls under cover of darkness. Inside the prison, Daniel felt the change before he understood it. New prisoners arrived with a different energy. They knew his name, his story. They came not as broken men, but as believers. "Teacher," whispered Kwame, a young man arrested for distributing pamphlets, "the whole country knows your name now. Your words are everywhere." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Through the small window of his cell, he could see the first hints of dawn. 7 years had passed, but somewhere beyond these walls, the seed of revolution was growing. Late at night, when the guards were asleep, Daniel could hear singing, soft, melodic, dangerous. The prisoners had turned his lessons into songs, and the songs had escaped into the world. Freedom, he realized, was not something that could be imprisoned. It was something that lived in the human heart, waiting to be awakened. The revolution began not with gunfire, but with silence. Across the country, people simply stopped obeying. Shops closed, schools emptied, government offices stood vacant. The regime's brutal machinery ground to a halt when the people withdrew their consent. Daniel learned of the uprising from the changed behavior of his guards. Captain Mensah, once so cruel and confident, now avoided eye contact. The daily beatings stopped. Food portions increased. Something fundamental had shifted in the balance of power. On a humid Tuesday morning, Daniel heard something that made his heart race, his name being chanted by thousands of voices outside the prison walls. The sound grew louder, more insistent, until it seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Free Daniel, free Daniel, free Daniel. Through his tiny window, he glimpsed an ocean of people, more than he had ever seen in one place. They carried signs with his picture, his words, his teachings. Children sat on their father's shoulders. Women held candles that flickered like stars in the morning light. Captain Mensah appeared at his cell door, keys trembling in his hands. "The government has fallen," he said quietly. "The people, they want you." Daniel's legs nearly gave out. 7 years of darkness, and now this impossible brightness. As the cell door swung open, he saw Hirokazuwa, older now, but still radiant. Pushing through the crowd of reporters and officials, she ran to him, and he caught her in his arms, feeling the warmth of her tears against his cheek. "You never stopped believing," she whispered. "Neither did you," he replied, kissing her forehead. "Neither did any of us." The crowd outside erupted in celebration as Daniel emerged, blinking in the sunlight. 7 years of imprisonment had ended, but his real work, the work of building a nation worthy of its people's dreams, was just beginning. 3 months later, Daniel stood before the largest crowd in the nation's history. The presidential palace loomed behind him, its colonial architecture a reminder of past oppressions. But today, it would house something new, a government born from the people's will. "My fellow citizens," Daniel began, his voice carrying across the sea of faces, "I stand before you, not as a conquering hero, but as a teacher who has learned the greatest lesson of all, that true power belongs to the people, and leaders are merely their servants." Akasawa stood beside him, her hand in his, wearing the simple white dress they had chosen for their wedding ceremony the week before. They had married in the same village where Daniel once taught, surrounded by his former students and the families who had kept his memory alive. 7 years ago, they tried to silence me by putting me in a cell, Daniel continued. But they forgot that ideas cannot be imprisoned. Love cannot be caged. Hope cannot be contained. Every day of my imprisonment, your voices grew louder. Every night of my despair, your faith burned brighter. In the crowd, he spotted familiar faces: Ma, now a young teacher herself, beaming with pride; Kwame, who had become a journalist; countless others whose lives had been touched by the ripple effects of that first brave lesson. "Today, we begin the work of building the nation we dreamed of in our darkest hours," Daniel declared. "A nation where no child goes hungry, where every voice matters, where justice flows like a river and freedom shines like the sun." As the crowd roared its approval, Daniel felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had gone from prisoner to president, from nobody to the voice of a nation. But the greatest transformation was yet to come, turning the dreams whispered in a dark cell into the reality of a free and prosperous country. The teacher had become the president, the prisoner had become the liberator, and the man who had dared to speak truth to power had become the leader who would teach an entire nation to find its voice.